"Is she aware I bought her?" Jeff asked, his voice low as he spoke to Mr. Mike, Maria's uncle, over the phone. "No, she isn't. And even if she does, is that a problem, sir?" Mr. Mike responded, his tone laced with indifference. "No, I just wanted to confirm," Jeff replied before hanging up the call. In the days that followed the incident, Jeff and Maria maintained a heavy silence between them. Jeff made sure she was well taken care of, ordering food to be delivered to the house so she would never go hungry. His actions, though distant, started to soften something inside Maria. Slowly, she began to fall for the man she could never see. Even after the fight, Jeff never forgot about her. He had options, beautiful women, but his acts of kindness were far more than what one might expect from someone who had bought her for a price. He didn't objectify her. There was genuine care in his actions. And Maria, despite all the pain, found herself missing his simple words, "Let me know if you need anything." Even that, she realized, had meant more than she let herself believe. As the weeks passed, things took a turn. Jeff seemed to intentionally distance himself from her, often avoiding coming home. Some nights, he stayed at his office, only to return the next day. But even in his absence, he ensured that guards were stationed around the house, watching over Maria's safety. It was as if he was still there in spirit, but physically, he was nowhere to be found. Still, Jeff found time in his day to monitor Maria, but not through direct contact. Instead, he spent his free time watching the security footage from the cameras around the house. Through the footage, Jeff saw things that caught him off guard. He watched Maria as she went to pick up the food he had ordered for her. He saw her smile as she leapt into a little dance, her joy so pure and innocent. One day, he saw her holding a piece of bread, pretending it was a microphone as she sang, her voice soft but full of heart. He couldn't help but laugh at her innocence. Watching her like this, her carefree nature, her sweetness, it stirred something in him that he couldn't ignore. That, he thought, was enough for now. The warmth that bloomed in his chest whenever he watched her filled the empty spaces he hadn't known existed. Despite the distance between them, he found solace in those quiet moments where he could see her, just be herself. For Maria, those small acts of kindness, like receiving the food, felt like a strange comfort. She didn't expect Jeff to act like a husband. They weren't really married in the way she had once dreamed of. But his consistent care, though subtle, kept her going. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing both between them and inside her. Jeff was an orphan, a man who had built an empire long before his parents' untimely death. His wealth was vast, inherited from his family and earned through years of dedication. But amidst the riches, he was lonely. People didn't see him as someone who simply wanted to be loved. Instead, they saw him as a man of power, a figure who commanded authority wherever he went. It was always like that, even as a child. From a young age, Jeff had been taught to lead, to be the strong one, to carry the weight of his family's legacy. And in doing so, Jeff had become a machine, functional, efficient, and emotionless. His feelings were buried beneath the layers of wealth and expectations, unseen by the world. To everyone around him, he was a mentor, a boss, the person everyone went to for guidance and success. But those close to him didn't understand the cost. They didn't see the loneliness that haunted him when he was alone in his mansion, surrounded by servants and business partners who only cared for his wealth, not the person behind it. Growing up as the only child of his parents, Jeff had a lot placed on his shoulders. His parents had made sure he knew that he was the heir to their empire, the one who would carry on their legacy. There was no room for mistakes, no room for weakness. He had to be strong. They had shielded him from the harsh realities of life. But in doing so, they had also stripped him of a childhood that could have been filled with joy, freedom, and simplicity. He once loved the piano. As a child, he would sit at the grand piano in their home, his small fingers dancing over the keys, playing melodies that made him feel free. The music was his escape, the one thing that allowed him to forget the weight of his responsibilities, if only for a few moments. But the constant reminders from his parents to buck up, the never-ending expectations, had slowly driven him away from the one thing that made him feel human. Playing the piano became a distant memory, something he could no longer afford to indulge in. And so, Jeff had shut down his emotions, burying them beneath the surface of his polished exterior. The world saw him as a success, someone who had it all together, someone who didn't need anyone. But deep down, he was just a man who wanted to be seen as more than the sum of his achievements. He was a man who longed for connection, for someone to see him for who he truly was, not just for the wealth he commanded or the influence he held. And that's why Mariah Somione, so innocent and untouched by the world, had started to stir something inside him. She didn't see him as Jeffrey, the rich businessman, the mentor, the boss. She only saw him as a man, and that was something he hadn't felt in years. The beautiful, sighted women Jeff could have pursued knew exactly how much he was worth. They were drawn to his wealth, his status, his power. To them, he was a prosaic man who could provide anything they wanted. No one would ever reject Jeff. He had the world at his feet. Women would fall over themselves to be with him, not because they loved him for who he truly was, but because of the life he could offer. They saw the money, the prestige, the luxuries, and that was enough. Marriage had never been on Jeff's agenda. He'd always thought of it as something transactional, another business deal, another arrangement to maintain appearances. He never believed love was part of the equation. After all, how could it be? His entire life had been shaped by duty and expectation. In his world, relationships were founded on mutual benefit, not on connection or affection. But then came Maria. Maria was different. She had nothing to offer him except her presence, and that was the one thing he had craved most. Despite her blindness, despite the poverty she had come from, Maria had a purity about her that none of the others did. Her innocence, her honesty, and the way she didn't see him as Jefferithi powerful, wealthy business, man made her stand out in a way no one else had. Watching her, Jeff had started to desire her, not as a commodity, but as a person. He saw her loneliness, her vulnerability, and something in him stirred. It wasn't just about her beauty, though. She was beautiful in her own way, even if he couldn't see it in the traditional sense. It was the way she played the piano, the way she would dance in the garden, the way she seemed to take joy in the simplest things, even in the midst of everything she had lost. Maria didn't want anything from him. She didn't care about his money or his status. She wasn't impressed by his empire or his riches. She didn't even see him as the man everyone else saw. And that, to Jeff, was both terrifying and refreshing. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not for the man he had become because of his wealth, but for the person he truly was underneath it all. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to feel a connection, let alone a desire to have someone in his life who didn't want anything from him. Maria had started to chip away at the walls Jeff had built around himself, and for the first time, marriage was no longer something he feared or avoided. It wasn't about power or control. It wasn't even about ownership. For Jeff, it was about the possibility of something real, something genuine. Maybe, just maybe, Maria could be the friend he had always longed for. Someone who saw him as more than just Jeffrey, the rich man. But as much as Jeff desired it, he wasn't sure how to get there. He had spent so long in a world where everything was about transactions, about what could be gained, that he didn't know how to build a relationship based on trust and understanding. Still, as he watched Maria, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to life than wealth, power, and status. Maria sat quietly in her room, the soft hum of the house around her, but there was something different in the air today. She could feel it, a strange pull, as if something was about to shift. Then, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway reached her ears. She knew it was Jeff's car, one he always drove when he came home. For a moment, she hesitated, her fingers clutching the hem of her dress. Something inside her stirred, and she couldn't sit still. She stood up, walked slowly to the door, and stood just beside it, unsure of what she was waiting for, but unable to fight the urge to be there when Jeff stepped inside. As Jeff walked in through the door, he didn't expect to see Maria standing there. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her. He froze for a moment, the air between them charged with a tension neither of them had yet understood. Maria couldn't see him, but still, Jeff felt like he wanted to disappear. Why did she have such an effect on him? Why did he feel so exposed in front of her, even though she couldn't see him? "Maria," he whispered, scratching the back of his head awkwardly. "I am sorry, Jeff," Maria said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I thought you didn't really care about me, but I was wrong. I'm sorry I judged you too quickly." Jeff blinked, not expecting an apology. His heart skipped a beat. He had been waiting for this moment, wanting some sort of clarity, some kind of acknowledgement from her. But hearing her words it was more than he had expected. "Oh, that," he coughed, his voice slightly awkward as he tried to collect himself. "I didn't expect you to apologize." Maria smiled softly, but there was still a hint of nervousness in her voice. "I should have seen it earlier," she admitted. "I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions. You've been kind to me." "Oh, yes?" Jeff responded, his voice deepening. "I'm sorry too, Maria. I know we didn't exactly date before we got married. I was wondering if, maybe, you'd like to go on a date with me." He paused, his words coming out slowly as if he were picking them carefully, feeling like a teenager asking out his first crush. Maria stood there, taken aback for a moment, but then a wide smile spread across her face, and she burst into laughter. It was spontaneous, full of joy and relief, a sound Jeff had never quite heard from her before. Hearing it made him smile too, and soon he was laughing along with her. They had no idea what was so funny, but they laughed anyway, sharing a rare moment of carefree joy. "I've never been on a date before," Maria said between fits of laughter, wiping away a tear. "Me neither," Jeff replied, his words catching her off guard. "I've never taken any lady on a date." Maria's laughter faltered, and she turned her head slightly in surprise, feeling the sincerity in his words. She had never expected him to admit something like that, especially after everything that had happened. "Well, I guess we can figure it out together then," she said, her voice light, her heart suddenly feeling lighter too. The two stood in the doorway, the tension between them softening, replaced by something new. It was a moment of connection, an understanding of each other's vulnerabilities. Neither of them had ever expected to be in this situation married without truly knowing each other. Two people brought together by circumstance and expectation. But in this small, simple exchange, they found something else, the possibility of something real. The next day, Jeff went all out. He spent hours choosing the perfect outfit for Maria, wanting her to feel special. After rummaging through his wardrobe and picking out what he thought would suit her best, he carefully laid out a beautiful dress-a-soft, flowing, pale blue gown that shimmered in the light. The fabric felt like silk, smooth and delicate. He had never seen Maria in such a dress before, and he hoped it would make her feel as beautiful as she truly was. Maria was surprised when she touched the dress, her fingers gliding over the soft fabric. She had never worn anything like it before, but Jeff had insisted. With a mix of excitement and nervousness, she changed into it, letting the dress fall perfectly around her. She felt like she was stepping into a dream, one she never thought she would experience. When she stepped out of her room, Jeff's eyes widened in surprise. He had never seen her like this, her beauty shining through in ways he hadn't fully realized until now. The dress hugged her gently, and the way she carried herself made everything seem brighter. Maria smiled softly, feeling like a different version of herself. "You look stunning," Jeff said, his voice soft and sincere. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for him. He walked over to her, taking her hand gently. They made their way to the car, and from there, Jeff drove them to a hotel so luxurious that Maria felt like she had stepped into another world. The entire place had been booked for them. There were no other guests, no distractions, just the two of them. The hotel was grand, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and soft classical music filling the air. It was the kind of place Maria had only heard of in stories, but here she was, walking through its halls as Jeff's guest. They spent the evening exploring the hotel, laughing and enjoying each other's company. At one point, they left the building to walk through the hotel's beautifully manicured gardens, hand in hand. The cool evening air was refreshing, and the night sky above them was speckled with stars. But as they were strolling, the clouds that had been gathering suddenly burst open. The rain came down in heavy sheets, soaking them within seconds. Without missing a beat, Jeff quickly removed his jacket and draped it over Maria, pulling her close to shield her from the rain. They ran back toward the car, laughing as they splashed through the puddles. Maria, her hair damp and her dress clinging to her in the rain, felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the jacket. She could feel Jeff's hand in hers, his protection, his care. They finally reached the car, both of them drenched, but laughing nonetheless. Jeff helped her into the car, the warmth of the vehicle wrapping around them, and they drove back home. The silence in the car comfortable, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived back at the house, Jeff walked Maria to her room, his hand lingering on the door as he opened it for her. "I had a great time tonight," he said quietly, his eyes softening. Maria smiled, her heart still fluttering from the evening. "Me too," she replied, feeling like she was glowing. She had never imagined a day like this would come, let alone a night so full of laughter, tenderness, and genuine connection. "Good night, Maria," Jeff said, his voice low, a small smile tugging at his lips. He turned to leave, but Maria stopped him just before he stepped out of the door. "Good night, Jeff," she said, her smile widening. "Thank you for today. It was the best day ever." Jeff stood in the doorway for a moment, his heart unexpectedly full. He nodded and stepped back, closing the door gently behind him. As he made his way to his own room, he couldn't help but smile. He felt like he had hit the jackpot. For once, he wasn't the man with power, status, and wealth. He was just a man who had shared a beautiful moment with someone who saw him for who he truly was. He laid on his bed, his thoughts racing with everything that had happened. The sound of the rain outside was soothing, and for the first time in a long while, Jeff felt content. He smiled to himself, realizing that tonight had been just the beginning of something unexpected, something real. Maria, on the other hand, lay in her bed, her heart still racing, her face warm with the happiness she couldn't quite put into words. She couldn't stop smiling, even if there was no one to see it. She had never known a day like this. She had never known what it felt like to be treated with such kindness, such genuine care. It was a day she would always treasure, no matter what came next. Meanwhile, Mr. Mike, his wife Mrs. Ruth, and their only son Matthew were living in a new world, one where their days of financial struggle seemed like a distant memory. The $20 million they had received from Jeff had opened doors they had never imagined. The extravagant life they were now living made them feel as though they were on top of the world. They spent lavishly, without thinking twice, and they were eager to show off their newfound wealth. Mrs. Ruth in particular reveled in the transformation. The first thing she did was change their wardrobes. Everything was new, sleek, and expensive. She wanted the neighbors to know they had arrived. She insisted on designer clothes, fine jewelry, and anything that screamed luxury. To her, it wasn't just about looking good, it was about asserting their status, about being seen as part of the elite class. She spent money on anything that caught her eye, unaware of how quickly it was all slipping away. The neighbors began to gossip. Whispers about the sudden wealth of the family spread like wildfire. They were now being seen as relatives to the famous billionaire, Jeffrey, and many believed that was the reason for the transformation. No one knew the truth that Jeff had bought Maria, that the marriage was nothing more than a facade to cover up the financial transaction. Mrs. Ruth's extravagant spending and the family's new high status were all based on a lie, but the outside world had no idea. They didn't even notice Maria's absence. For them, it was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. No longer was there the blind girl to take care of. No longer was there a need to deal with the constant reminders of her presence. Mrs. Ruth no longer had to deal with the girl's disobedience or her constant complaints. Mr. Mike no longer had to pretend he cared for her. They were free from her, and it felt like a weight had been taken off their backs. Matthew, too, relished in the new life. The bullying of Maria seemed a distant memory, and now he could indulge in his own whims without a second thought. He took pride in flaunting his new lifestyle to his friends, boasting about how his family was now connected to Jeffrey, the rich billionaire. The thought that the money was actually Maria's sacrifice never crossed his mind. To him, it was just another way to elevate his own status and enjoy the finer things in life. But despite the newfound luxury, a part of Mrs. Ruth couldn't shake a nagging feeling. She often found herself staring at the space where Maria used to sit during meals, or in the garden where the girl would sometimes play the piano. But she quickly pushed those thoughts aside, telling herself she was better off without the burden of Maria. After all, Maria had never fit in with their family, and now, with the money and the new lifestyle, everything seemed so much better. The idea of living without the girl made everything feel so much more comfortable, no more guilt, no more inconvenience. The absence of Maria, though unnoticed in the moment, had altered the dynamics of their household. For them, it was as though she had never existed, just another fleeting part of their lives that they had easily discarded for the sake of their own comfort and appearance. They were too consumed by their new status to care about the cost it had come at, or about the girl they had sold off like an object to be traded. As the weeks passed, the bond between Jeff and Maria deepened in ways neither of them fully understood. They couldn't find the words to say it, but they were in love, an impossible love that no one could easily comprehend. They had come from different worlds, bound together by circumstances neither could change, yet something in their hearts knew that they were meant to be. Maria, despite knowing she had been bought for a price, saw beyond that. She saw Jeff's true intentions in his actions, in the way he treated her with kindness and respect. He didn't see her as just a transaction. He took her out on dates, not out of obligation, but to show her a world she never thought she could be a part of. He taught her how to cook dinner, how to create meals with love and care, and he even enrolled her in a professional piano class, something she had always dreamed of but never thought she could afford. He would pick her up from class with a basket of chocolates, as if to remind her that she was precious to him. And most importantly, Jeff wasn't ashamed to show her off. He didn't hide her away like some trophy or secret. He made her feel wanted, beautiful, even though she had long forgotten what she looked like. In her heart, she knew that he saw her for who she was, not the blind girl, but Maria, the woman with a soul full of depth and emotion. She didn't need to see to feel the love he poured into her life. Jeff, on the other hand, found something rare in Maria. She couldn't see him, yet she trusted him completely. There was a quiet strength in her that made him believe she would always support him, even when the weight of the world felt too much to bear. On his rough days, when stress and exhaustion clouded his mind, Maria would gently run her soft hands through his hair, assuring him that everything would be just fine. In those moments, Jeff felt like he could face anything with her by his side. Maria made him breakfast in the mornings, learning new recipes just to surprise him with something special. Her determination to learn, to care for him, made him feel like the luckiest man alive. It was a love so simple, yet so powerful, a love that didn't need words but was felt in every touch, every act of kindness, every shared moment. One evening, as they sat in Maria's room next to the piano, Jeff brought out a small, carefully wrapped gift. He handed it to her with a smile that showed the affection he had for her. Maria carefully unwrapped the gift and found a pair of expensive glasses. Her fingers brushed the smooth edges, unsure of what to make of it. "I want to see everything," Jeff said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. His hand slowly moved up to her face, gently cupping her cheeks as if asking for her permission. "Why did you stay blindfolded?" he added, his voice laced with tenderness. Tears welled up in Maria's eyes, and she whispered, "The scar. It was too bad. They said it's disgusting." Her mind drifted back when she first moved in with Uncle Mike. She could remember his wife accusing her of looking so disgusting that she almost felt like she needed to leave. She had brought out a piece of clothes. "Close those blind eyes, Maria," she had said, and Maria did as she tied the fabric covering her white blind eyes. At first, Maria wasn't comfortable, but as time passed, her eyes got used to staying in the dark, the blindfold shading her from all the lights in this world. Jeff's heart broke for her, but he shook his head, his voice firm but gentle. "I don't think so." He reached out, his hands brushing against her blindfold. "Let me check. Do you trust me?" Maria hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes." "Can I take the blindfold off?" Jeff asked, his voice soft, making sure she was ready for this moment too. "Yes, please," Maria whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. With slow, careful movements, Jeff untied the blindfold, taking it off her face. The sudden flash of light was sharp, and Maria felt her face squint instinctively, but she didn't cover her face. She didn't want to hide from him. As the light faded, Maria's eyes opened, revealing the white, blind eyes that had long been hidden beneath the cloth. They were still, staring at Jeff, not with pity or sadness, but with trust. A deep trust that he would never see her any differently. Jeff stared at her for a moment, speechless. Then, his voice broke the silence, full of genuine emotion. "You are so beautiful," he whispered, meaning every word, not out of pity, but because he truly saw her. In that moment, her blindness didn't define her. Her heart, her spirit, her soul, those were what made her beautiful. Maria smiled, a soft, almost shy smile, and looked away, feeling both vulnerable and safe with him. "Can I kiss you?" Jeff asked, his voice a little hesitant, unsure if she felt the same way. Maria's heart raced. She nodded, a quiet affirmation that she wanted this too. She trusted him completely. Jeff leaned in slowly, and their lips met in a tender kiss, a kiss that held all the emotions they had both kept hidden for so long. In that moment, there were no more barriers between them. Not the price of her being sold, not the scars she carried, not the past that had haunted them both. They were simply two people who had found something real, something beautiful in each other. They kissed. The world outside seemed to fade away. And for the first time in Maria's life, she felt seen not just as a blind girl, but as someone worthy of love, of a future. And for Jeff, it was the beginning of something he never thought he'd experience: true, unconditional love. In the days that followed, Jeff couldn't stop thinking about Maria. He wondered, more and more, what she would look like if she could see him with her own eyes. What if she could gaze at the world around her with the same clarity that others had? What if, just for once, she could see the beauty he saw in her? Her eyes, so still, so trusting, had always captivated him, but he couldn't help but wonder what it would be like for her to look at him without any barriers, without the blindfold, without the world that had been so kind to him but so cruel to her. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of her room, next to the piano where they often shared their moments, Jeff decided to voice the thought that had been on his mind for days. "Maria," he began, his voice soft but filled with something new, urgency perhaps, or an unspoken hope. "I've been thinking a lot. What if you could see again?" Maria tilted her head slightly, her heart beating faster at the unfamiliar tone in Jeff's voice. She had never asked for this. Her blindness was something she had lived with, accepted, and in some ways, even found peace with. But the question lingered, stirring something deep within her. "See again?" she echoed, her voice unsure. "Yes," Jeff said, his hand gently touching hers. "What if we tried? What if there was a way for you to see the world again, to see everything that you've always missed? What if you could see the world the way I see it?" Maria blinked, her heart racing. Could it be possible? Could the world she had only known through sound, touch, and smell suddenly be open to her in a way she never thought possible? For a moment, she hesitated. The idea of surgery, of undergoing a process that could potentially change her entire life, was both thrilling and terrifying. What would she see? How would it feel to have her vision restored? Jeff continued, sensing her hesitation. "I know it's a big decision, Maria. It's a risk, a challenge, but think about it. Think about how beautiful the world could be, how much you could experience with new eyes. You don't have to stay in the dark anymore unless you choose to." Maria sat quietly, processing his words. She had never thought of it like that, never imagined the possibility that she could one day open her eyes and see the world she had only dreamed of. "I've never thought about it," Maria whispered. "I've learned to live without it. But maybe I could try. Maybe I want to see the world again, to see what you see." Jeff smiled. a mixture of relief and hope washing over him. "I'll be here with you every step of the way. You don't have to do this alone. We'll figure it out together." And so the journey began. Their first stop was the best eye doctor in the city, someone Jeff had researched thoroughly. The doctor, Dr. Bennett, was renowned for his expertise in rare eye surgeries. When Jeff and Maria walked into the doctor's office, Maria could feel the weight of the decision ahead of her. She had never been in a place like this before. The clinic was pristine, its halls lined with posters of beautiful landscapes, images of clear blue skies, and breathtaking sunsets. All of these things were foreign to her. She had heard of them, imagined them, but never seen them for herself. Dr. Bennett was kind and patient. He explained the procedure thoroughly, outlining the risks and the chances of success. He spoke about how the surgery would work and what the recovery would look like. Maria listened intently, asking questions about the process, and though a part of her was afraid, she also felt a glimmer of excitement deep within. Could this really be possible? Could she truly see again? After a few tests, Dr. Bennett gave them the results. "Maria, based on the condition of your eyes, we believe that the surgery could be successful. Your chances of regaining sight are high. Of course, there are risks, as with any surgery, but it's worth considering." Maria felt a wave of emotion. She had never expected to hear something so positive. For the first time, it felt like the world was opening up to her. She looked over at Jeff, his hand on hers. She nodded. "I want to do it. I want to see." The surgery was scheduled for the following week, and as the day approached, Maria's nerves began to surface. Jeff could feel the tension in her body, and he did everything he could to calm her. He made sure she knew she wasn't alone. Every step of the way, he was by her side. On the day of the surgery, Jeff held her hand tightly as they entered the hospital. The sterile smell of the hospital mixed with the weight of anticipation in the air. Maria was nervous, her heart racing as they prepared her for the procedure. "You're going to be okay, Maria," Jeff whispered to her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I'll be right here when you wake up. Just remember this is for you. You're so strong." Maria managed a weak smile, grateful for his constant support. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "I know," Jeff replied, his voice steady. "But I'm with you. I believe in you." The surgery went smoothly, and as Maria slowly woke up in the recovery room, Jeff was right there beside her, holding her hand. Her eyes were closed, but she could feel the presence of the man who had been by her side through everything. "Maria," Jeff said softly, his voice full of hope. Maria opened her eyes slowly, feeling a sharp, uncomfortable light hit her face. She squinted, trying to adjust to the new sensation. It was overwhelming, but she didn't cover her eyes. Instead, she let them adjust to the light, slowly, bit by bit. "How does it feel?" Jeff asked, his voice filled with anticipation. Maria blinked a few times, adjusting to the overwhelming brightness. Then she looked at him. His face was clear, so clear. She could see him, truly see him, his eyes, his smile, the way his hair curled slightly at the edges. Everything felt so new, so vibrant. Tears filled her eyes as she gazed at him. "I can see you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I can see everything." Jeff smiled, his heart soaring at the sight of her joy. He leaned in and kissed her forehead gently, holding her close. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "You did it." Maria's new eyes made her the most lovely person Jeff had ever seen. The transformation was nothing short of breathtaking. Her eyes, once blind, now shone with a new light, clear, vibrant, and full of life. The way they sparkled when she smiled, the way they glinted with curiosity when she explored the world around Harriet made her even more beautiful than Jeff had imagined. Every time he looked at her, he couldn't help but stare. There was something mesmerizing about her gaze, the way her eyes took in the world, how she marveled at even the simplest things. It was like she was seeing everything for the first time, and that innocence, that wonder, only made her more captivating. Jeff would find himself lost in her gaze, captivated by the way her eyes held so much depth and warmth. At first, Maria wore a pair of glasses, as instructed by the doctor, to help her eyes adjust to the world around her. The glasses were a necessary step in her recovery, a way to protect her eyes while they healed. But even with the glasses, Jeff couldn't take his eyes off her. Every time she wore them, it was as if they added a certain charm to her appearance, making her look even more sophisticated. But as the weeks went by, Maria's eyes grew stronger, and the need for the glasses diminished. She began to feel more confident, no longer needing the extra protection. Slowly but surely, she began to do away with the glasses entirely, her eyes now able to see clearly without any aid. The first time Maria went without them, she stood in front of the mirror, hesitant at first. She hadn't seen her reflection in years, and now it was like a new world was opening up to her. She smiled at herself, feeling the warmth of her newfound vision. Jeff was there, as always, watching her with a tenderness that only deepened with every passing day. He couldn't help but smile as he saw her confidence grow. "You look perfect," he said softly, his voice filled with admiration. Maria smiled, a little bashful, but it was clear she was beginning to feel more comfortable in her own skin, more at home in the world she could now see. For Jeff, it was a dream come true seeing her, really seeing her for the first time. She had always been beautiful to him, but now, with her eyes shining so brightly, she was even more breathtaking. The love between them grew stronger with each passing day. There were no longer any walls between them, no blindness, no separation. They could see each other completely, and that made all the difference. Maria was not just a woman who had been saved from the darkness. She was a woman who had truly come into her own. And Jeff, for the first time in his life, felt like he wasn't alone. He had found someone who loved him for who he truly was, not for his wealth or status, but for the person he was inside. They had both found something in each other that neither of them had expected: true love and the beauty of seeing the world through each other's eyes. As the days passed, Maria adjusted to her newfound vision, and Jeff remained by her side through every step. They explored the world together, visiting parks, going on walks, and experiencing the beauty she had never seen. For Jeff, it was a new kind of joy seeing Maria see the world for the first time, as an adult after losing her sight as a child. It felt like witnessing a miracle. The love between them had always been special, but now it felt like it had truly blossomed into something beautiful and complete. They were no longer just two people living in the same house. They were partners in every sense, walking through life together with open eyes, both literally and metaphorically. Jane, the professional maid, didn't let things slide so easily. The fire inside her burned hotter with every passing day. How could Jeff fire her for a blind girl? Someone who couldn't even see him. Someone who had been bought and sold like an object. Jane had served him for years, and despite her role, she had developed a sense of entitlement. To her, it didn't make sense that Maria Somioni, who couldn't even appreciate Jeff's wealth or status, was now living a life of luxury while she had been cast aside. Her jealousy grew with each passing day, festering until it became an obsession. She watched from the shadows, keeping track of every little movement Jeff made with Maria. Jane didn't know the full extent of the changes in Maria's life, not yet. She still thought Maria was the same blind girl, the same burden, the same naive woman she could easily manipulate. She had no idea Maria had been given the gift of sight, and even less did she realize the bond that had grown between Jeff and Maria. But Jane was patient. She had always been a master of waiting for the right moment to strike. She knew that if she could get close enough to Maria, if she could find the perfect opportunity to embarrass her or make her look incompetent, Jeff would have no choice but to reconsider everything. She was convinced that if she could break their relationship, she would have her chance to win Jeff's favor back. Meanwhile, back at Mr. Mike and Mrs. Ruth's home, the months had passed, and so had their fortune. The $20 million they had received from Jeff was almost completely gone. They had lived extravagantly, without planning or foresight, and now they were struggling to maintain the luxurious lifestyle they had grown accustomed to. They had made no investments, no plans for the future. The money had slipped away as quickly as it had come. The once bright, carefree smiles on Mr. Mike and Mrs. Ruth's faces were now replaced with anxiety. They had lived like royalty for a while, but now reality was setting in. They couldn't keep up with their spending, and the luxury they'd tasted was slipping through their fingers. Mrs. Ruth, who had always been driven by greed, was becoming increasingly desperate. The extravagant shopping trips, the lavish dinners, the designer clothes, they were all fading, and she couldn't accept that. It was then that Mr. Mike, who had been silent for some time, devised a plan. They could still make more money from Jeff, even if it meant blackmail. He came up with a twisted scheme, one that would put them back on top, at least for a while. He knew Jeff had been involved with Maria, and now that she was no longer in their care, he assumed that Jeff would be more than willing to give them more money if they played their cards right. "We're going to keep collecting money from him," Mr. Mike said one evening, his voice cold and calculating. "But if he refuses to comply, we'll blackmail him. We'll tell him the truth that he deceived us into selling Maria, that he has some wild fantasy about being with disabled women. People will believe us, Ruth. We just need to threaten him enough." Mrs. Ruth's eyes gleamed with excitement at the thought. "Blackmail him? That's a brilliant idea, Mike. We'll make sure he knows we're serious. We're his family, and if he really cared about Maria, he wouldn't let us suffer like this. We'll tell him he owes us for what we did." The plan was set into motion quickly. Mr. Mike and Mrs. Ruth began to gather their evidence half-truths and exaggerations designed to make Jeff feel guilty. They spoke to some of the neighbors, planting the seeds of suspicion about Jeff's relationship with Maria, twisting the narrative to make it seem darker and more sinister. They knew that if they pushed hard enough, Jeff would give them what they wanted. As they began to form their plan, Maria and Jeff continued to grow closer, their bond deepening with every passing day. They didn't know about the threat that was brewing just beneath the surface. While Jeff was focused on making Maria feel loved, cherished, and safe, the shadows in his past were starting to creep in, threatening to undo everything they had worked so hard to build. The night was filled with music, laughter, and clinking glasses as Jeff and Maria entered the upscale party. It was a lavish event, with well-dressed guests and bright lights that illuminated the ballroom, but amidst the luxury, Maria couldn't help but feel out of place. She had always been in the background, a silent observer of a world she had only heard about through Jeff's words. But tonight, she was by his side, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged in his world. Jeff had taken her out to show her a new life, and for a moment, she had forgotten everything that had once held her back. But Jane had other plans. She had been lurking in the shadows, watching from the corners of the room, waiting for the right moment to strike. Her jealousy had consumed her entirely. The bitterness she felt about being replaced by Maria, the woman Jeff had chosen over her, had driven her to this point. Jane wasn't going to let things go so easily. She had hired a few men to follow Maria, to harass her, and she waited for the perfect opportunity to ruin everything. That moment came when Maria needed to use the restroom. She walked confidently toward the hallway, unaware that Jane had arranged this setup. As she approached the bathroom door, she hesitated for a moment, noticing there was a male and female restroom, but she was certain she had chosen the right one. Before she could open the door, a man's voice broke through the silence. "Hey, blind girl, you're in the wrong restroom. Come in here," one of the men said, his voice dripping with malice. Maria's heart raced, and she froze for a second, trying to adjust to the situation. How did this man know she was blind before? She was wearing black eyeglasses, and the man wasn't aware she could see him. She hadn't met him before, and the voice was unfamiliar. "I know my way around," Maria replied, trying to sound confident as she reached for the female restroom door. But the man stepped forward quickly, blocking her path. He grabbed her hand, forcefully pulling her in the direction of the male restroom. Maria tried to resist, but the man's grip tightened, his actions completely catching her off guard. The sound of her heart pounding filled her ears as she fought back, her fear growing with every step they forced her to take. She could hear the other men in the restroom, laughing quietly, and she knew something was terribly wrong. Jane, who had been waiting outside, walked calmly towards Jeff with a grim look on her face. "You need to see something," she said coldly. "There are things you don't know about Maria." Jeff had followed her, sensing something wrong. Just as Maria felt the panic rising inside her, a voice shouted from behind her. "Let her go." The man holding Maria's wrist turned in surprise, releasing her hand just as Jeff stormed into the bathroom, his eyes wide with fury. Maria, trembling, stumbled back into Jeff's arms, her heart racing. Maria clinging to him, tears streaming down her face. She was shaking, trying to catch her breath, and Jeff's protective instincts kicked in. "What is this, Jane?" Jeff demanded, his voice filled with disgust. "What are you doing?" Maria, still trembling, looked up at Jeff, her face a mix of fear and confusion. She was too scared to even process what had just happened. The idea that someone would want to hurt her, to take advantage of her in such a vulnerable moment, was beyond anything she had ever imagined. "Why did you do this, Jane?" Jeff asked, turning to face her, his voice full of disbelief and anger. Why her? Why a blind girl? Jane screamed, anger surging through her as her plans had crumbled. Jane's face flushed with frustration and something darker. Why her? Why did you choose her? She continued with so much fury. Maria, still holding on to Jeff, slowly turned her head. The shades she had worn to cover her eyes slipped off her face, falling to the floor. For the first time since the incident, Maria made eye contact with Jane. She could see everything now, and the confrontation felt even more intense. You can see, Jane stammered, shocked beyond belief. She had no idea that Maria's blindness had been temporary, that Maria could now see the world just as anyone else could. Before Jane could say another word, the security guards moved in quickly, arresting the men who had tried to drag Maria into the male restroom. They attempted to escape, but they were quickly subdued, their escape thwarted by the security team. Along with the men, Jane was also arrested, her attempt to cause chaos having backfired completely. As the scene unfolded, Jeff held Maria tightly in his arms, his protective instinct still on high alert. He could feel the weight of what had just happened, the fear that Maria had endured. I was so scared, Jeff, Maria whispered, her voice trembling as she held on to him. What have I done? Her body was still shaking from the traumatic experience. Jeff gently lifted her chin, his eyes filled with nothing but love and reassurance. I'm here now, he said softly, kissing her forehead. You're safe now. Maria closed her eyes, allowing herself to lean into him, feeling the safety of his embrace. Thank you, she whispered again, grateful for Jeff's protection. The warmth of his arms was the only thing that kept her grounded in that moment. The party, which had once been filled with laughter and celebration, had now turned into a place of chaos. But for Maria and Jeff, at that moment, everything else ceased to matter. What mattered was that Maria was safe, and Jeff had kept his promise to protect her.